Hi guys, so on today's video we will be learning about kinetic energy. So kinetic energy is basically the energy of mass and motion. In other words, the kinetic energy of when an object is in the energy in which it contains basically is in motion. So basically I throw this in across the room and it's in motion basically. Kinetic energy also has the ability to do work, which is in joules, and work is defined as force acting upon an object in the direction of motion. Also, kinetic energy can be stored. Kinetic energy is mostly converted into potential energy because while it is not actually doing work, it still has the potential to do work, basically. For example, if I drop an object from a shelf or release it at a high spring, the potential energy is converted back into kinetic energy itself. Okay, so why is kinetic energy important to learn? Kinetic energy is important to learn and is an important matter to study in physics because it is a crucial tool in which it is used in the microscopic world. It is one of the ways in which we relate mass and motion and force to describe the state of an object and predict its interactions with the rest of the world. Another thing, kinetic energy fundamentally affects the way moving particles interact with the fabric of space and time. Hence, for instance, as the object increases in velocity, its energy increases as well, so does the mass. Therefore, the energy isn't just a measure of the state of the particle, it is the energy itself in which a fundamental component of the particle's substance. So therefore, kinetic energy is around us and it's very crucial that we know because you could basically predict the velocity of another object like through time. So some examples of kinetic energy would be a moving car, a bullet from a gun, a flying airplane, walking or running, or a roller coaster. Okay? So the equation for kinetic energy is basically a half, 1/2 or 0.5 times m, which is mass of an object, and multiplied by velocity of an object. In other words, it is speed. Velocity is speed. So this one right here, that's the equation. And here's just some extra notes. So the half within the kinetic energy equation, the formula, basically it's defined as the work needed to accelerate a body of a given mass from rest to its stated velocity. Because at first I was unsure, okay, why is half in the formula? And it's basically another important component to find the kinetic energy itself. It can also be used to, like say in basic kinematics, work is defined as a product of the force and distance, and distance can be defined as the product of velocity and time. So that's kind of like the same thing as the half in the kinetic energy formula. Okay, so all right, hold on a second. All right, guys, so now we're going to learn how to calculate kinetic energy. There's basically 3 parts to this. So first, this is just a note that I jotted down from an online source. So this is the equation to calculate velocity, distance divided by time. So calculating velocity of an object, basically you can determine the velocity by using the distance of an object traveling and how long it takes to cover that distance. The units for velocity are meters per second. But down to our first example, calculating kinetic energy. So the first one represents you already have the mass and velocity in your given equation. All you have to do is just plug it in. So for the first one, KE, short for kinetic energy, is going to be, so this is the step one. You just write down the first equation so you won't get confused. Second one, so as you can see, the given mass is 55 kilograms. So all you have to do is 0.5 multiplied by 55 times the given velocity, which is 38.87 minutes per second. And so below that, I just kept the two first components the same, and I just multiplied this by itself, which is 14.97. And lastly, the initial answer would be 411.675 in joules. And usually when you're given the mass and velocity and you just plug in the numbers, you always have to put joules, only because it's a standard unit of measurement kinetic energy and you just don't want to be confused. But this would be your initial answer, okay? And so to our second example, this is how to find velocity. So your mass is 30 kilograms. Kinetic energy is 500 joules. Now you're trying to find the velocity. So once again, you want to write down the formula so you won't get confused. This would be the equation you want to go by. So you would plug in KE, the kinetic energy, by 500 joules, equaling 0.5 times 30 kilograms times velocity squared. So for the first one, so you want to write velocity squared equals 500 joules divided by 0.5 times 30 kilograms, which will, so it's kind of like combining like terms at the same time. So you want to keep 500 the same, but you want to multiply these two so it's abbreviated into a bigger or smaller number. So you would do 500 joules divided by 15 kilograms. Then you would do, so it would be 33.33 minutes per second squared. And afterwards, you would square root that answer that you got from this, and this would be your answer. So the velocity of 500 joules in 30 kilograms, it would be 5.77 minutes per second. Okay? All right, and lastly, down to our third example, kinetic energy. So this one, so we first went over kinetic energy, just plugging in the numbers. You already have the mass and velocity. Now the second one was finding velocity. Third one, you're just finding the mass. So for the third one, kinetic energy, you have 100 joules in works. Velocity, you have 5 minutes per second. All you need to do is find the mass. Once again, write down the formula so you don't get confused. You want to plug in the number that you already have so you know what you're trying to find. 100 joules equals 0.5 multiplied by mass multiplied by 5 minutes per second squared. Okay? So first thing you want to do, similar to finding velocity, you want to write 100 joules divided by 0.5 times 5 meters per second squared. Then you want to multiply this by itself before, so you would do 0.5 times 5 meters per second squared, and you would write the same thing, 0.5 times 25, because you have to multiply this by itself before you can multiply that by the half within the kinetic energy equation. So 5 meters per second, that would be 25, because it's 5 squared, so 5 times 5 is 25. Then you would write 100 joules divided by 12.5 after multiplying 0.5 times 25, which would give you the mass, which is 8 kilograms. So it's kind of like the same thing. basic math, honestly. But just remember to multiply the numbers that are in the parentheses first before multiplying it by the half. Therefore, you won't get confused along the way and get the wrong answer. So I hope this helped. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, comment down below or tell me. Thank you.